The other day, I was laughing whilst watching a video about a young man who wanted a business and not ministry. And guess what? I totally got him. But today I'm not laughing. Today we're getting uncomfortable. Because what happens when God called you to something and every single fiber of your being screams, absolutely not. Not because you don't love Him, but because saying yes feels like a trap. It feels like walking into a room where everyone is waiting to say, I told you so. If that resonates with you, if the thought of your calling makes you want to run and hide instead of step forward, then stay with me. Because I built a fortress of reasons to say no, and I thought it was impenetrable.
Welcome to Behold and Become, a space for integrated healing and becoming. Here you will enjoy teachings and conversations that heal the mind, shape the soul, and transform from the inside out. I'm Brenda Shoko, your host, pastor, author, social worker, and transformation coach.
Hello ladies, welcome to Behold and Become. I'm your host, Brenda. If you're joining me for the first time, thank you for making time to be with me. Please subscribe, like, and follow if you haven't already. And if you're a regular, hey girl, good to have you back. So let's start with the ugliest brick in my wall: failure. Where I was coming from, ministry was what you did when you couldn't make it in the real world. You failed at business, go to ministry. You messed up your education, preach. It was like the ultimate plan B. And me, I was already wearing the failure badge. I hadn't finished my A-levels. I had been pregnant in school. And guess what? People had already written the final chapter of my life without my permission, you all. Without my permission. And the verdict was, she won't amount to anything. So tell me, why on earth would I walk toward a pulpit? That felt like handing my critics the microphone, like I was framing their gossip and hanging it on the wall. I could hear them say, see, you see, we knew she couldn't do anything. There she is hiding behind the altar. And I refused to authenticate their lies. So I refused the call. Maybe you know that feeling. Not necessarily the same circumstances, but the deep gut-wrenching fear that saying yes to God will somehow prove your critics right. But it wasn't just what they thought. It was what I thought. And then there was my inner world, which was like a war zone. There was low self-esteem on the floor, constant self-doubt, shame that stuck to me like a shadow, and I couldn't shake, and this crushing, suffocating feeling of being unworthy. I looked at ministers and thought, God uses capable people, people who have it all together, people who can pray without stumbling over the words, people whose past doesn't whisper fraud every time they open their mouth. I didn't see a vessel. I saw a cracked pot with holes in the bottom. Now, how could I pour into anyone else when I myself, I was running on empty? How could I lead anyone out of darkness when I was still stumbling in my own? The gap between who I was and who a minister should be felt like a canyon. I couldn't see a bridge. I couldn't see a path. I just saw my own reflection, and all I felt was pity. And can we talk about personality for a second? I'm an introvert, reserved, quiet, and a bit shy sometimes. The minister in my head was loud, magnetic, surrounded by crowds, feeding off the energy of 1,000 handshakes. The thought of being in the middle of all that noise made me want to physically crawl under a bed and never come out. How could I stand in front of a crowd? More than that, how could I love and entertain people in the way it seemed you had to? My social battery dies just walking through a crowded grocery store, a full congregation. I did not flourish in those environments. So how could I? How could I be in this kind of a situation? I looked at ministry and saw a life of forced extroversion, a life where I'd always feel like a fish trying to climb a tree, exhausted, awkward, out of place. And then there was the title. Oh, the title. The title. Pastor? Suddenly being treated like something fragile, like something special, like something above. That just didn't feel uncomfortable. It actually felt wrong. My heart beats for equality, for the vulnerable, for the people society looks down on. I truly believe, that every single person is worthy of the same dignity. So, how could I accept a system that by its very structure puts me on a pedestal? I couldn't. I felt like it would be like accepting a crown when all I wanted really was to stand in the circle, and not just the pedestal, but the uniform, the unspoken script, how a pastor should talk, always measured, how they should behave, never too angry, never too real, always on, how they should dress. It felt like being handed a costume for a play that I'd never auditioned for, ladies. That feeling, the kind of feeling where I felt like a David when he was being handed the armor of a trained soldier who was used to wearing it. For me, that just didn't fit. And I'm not a performer. I'm what you see is what you get kind of a person. My authenticity, ladies, is my compass. So there was no way that I was going to act my life out like that. No way. Trying to squeeze myself into that mold wouldn't just be uncomfortable. It will be hypocrisy. I mean, it will be lying to everyone, and worst of all, lying to myself. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I would rather be a messy, real person outside the pulpit than a perfect one inside it. That wasn't giving for me. And finally, practically, I was terrified. Living as a pastor, living off offerings, at the mercy of people's generosity or a lack of it, that felt like building a house on sand, unstable, unsafe. I wanted control. I wanted to be in a career, in a business. I could hustle. I could plan my earnings. I could map my future. But depending on offerings, that felt like surrendering my security to something that was completely outside my control. I couldn't risk that. I had already lost so much, and I couldn't lose my stability too. So, here I was, a fortress, solid walls, logical bricks, deeply felt reasons, failure, shame, introversion, inequality, inauthenticity, instability. Every single reason was valid. Every single fear was real. And I was determined I was not going to live that life. Not at all. But here's what I didn't realize. Sometimes the very thing you run from is the exact place where God wants to meet you. Because here is what he finally whispered to me, not in a booming voice, but in the quiet. I'm not calling you because you're capable. I'm calling you because I am. I'm not asking you to be a perfect, polished replica of the pastor next door. I'm asking you to be the most authentic version of you, because that is the version that I created. The people you are called to, they don't need a performer. They need someone who knows what shame feels like. They need someone who has been in the pit. They need someone who won't stand above them and preach down, but who will stand beside them and say, me too. And that, for me, ladies, that changed everything. So, you know what's funny? Now that I'm actually in ministry, not the polished pedestal version, the one that I was terrified of, but the real gritty walking beside people version. I look back at the fortress I built and honestly, I laugh. Not because my fears weren't real, they were born deep real, but because I see now what I couldn't see then. Those bricks that I was so carefully stocking, they weren't protecting me, ladies. They were actually imprisoning me. Every excuse I held so tightly, the failure, the shame, the introversion, the pedestal, the uniform, the instability, every single one was a limiting belief dressed up in logic. And they were all fighting to keep me from this very moment with you, ladies. From sitting here, from talking to you, from knowing the deep soul level satisfaction of watching a sister breathe easier because something I said reminded her that she's not alone. I almost let my fears rob me of that. I almost let the fear of being called a failure stop me from walking in the very thing that could heal my own sense of failure. Can you see that? Can you see the cruelty of that, the irony? I thought I was actually protecting my future, and I was actually blocking my purpose. So, what changed? I made a decision. Not a feeling, not a sudden rush of confidence, a decision. I decided to lay my crown down. Not the pastor crown. I never wanted that one. I mean, my own crown. The heavy one I didn't even realize I was wearing. The crown of control. The crown of I need to have it all figured out first. The crown of I'll step forward when I feel worthy. I laid it down. I laid it down, ladies. I laid that crown down and I picked up his. And here's what I've learned. When you stop gripping your own life so tightly, you finally have free hands to receive what he's trying to give you. Was it scary? Yes. Was I still underqualified on paper? Absolutely. But God is not limited by your CV. He's not surprised by your past. He's not intimidated by your personality. He is faithful. And when I decided to trust that, to really trust it, everything shifted. Not overnight, not perfectly, but truly. And now I get to be here with you, ladies. Yes, I get to spend time with you, not because I became someone else, but because I finally believed that the someone he made me was enough. So, to the woman listening to me right now, maybe you are sitting exactly where I sat, not necessarily with the same reasons, but with the same clenched fist, the same fortress, the same I have every right to say no. And maybe your reasons are valid. Maybe they are even more painful than mine were. But sweet sister, hear me. Please hear me. God framed you, not as an afterthought, not as a compromise. He framed you deliberately, intentionally, with the exact temperament that you have. Yes, the exact history, the exact sensitivity, the exact fire in your bones that you will need for what he has called you to. He knew you. Before you made those mistakes, before you carried that shame, before the world wrought its conclusions about you, he knew you. And he called you anyway. So there's nothing about you that surprises God. Nothing. Not even your anxiety, not your introversion, not your sharp tongue or your soft heart, not the way you overthink or the way you feel too much. He's not, wringing his hands wondering if maybe he made a mistake. No. And he has made his grace available, not as a backup plan, but as the very engine of your calling. You don't need to arrive already perfect. You just need to arrive. That's all. That's all you need to do, ladies. You just need to arrive. So every time those excuses come creeping back, and they will, believe me, they will, because the enemy knows your weaknesses better than anyone. And if you are that woman who knows that God is asking you to step into something, but you feel stuck, you feel unequipped, unsure if you even had permission to try, I want you to remember this. You were made for much more. Not more business, not more performance, but more purpose. And you are definitely empowered for it. So, I wrote a book, Empowered for Purpose, to walk you through what I wish someone had told me back then. That the very things you think disqualify you are often the exact tools that God wants to use. It's an expositional devotional through the book of Ephesians, and I love the book of Ephesians. Oh, the book of Ephesians is actually one of my favorite books because it tells us about who God is and what He made you to be, and why you already have everything you need to walk in your purpose. So if you want to grab a copy of it, you're more than welcome to visit my website, brendashoko.com. Grab your soft copy, get to know what your purpose is all about, who God is, who He says you are, and that He has made you for much more. So I don't know what you're standing at the edge of today. Maybe it's a pulpit, maybe it's a business, maybe it's forgiveness, maybe it's just believing that you are allowed to take up space. But I know this. The voice that is telling you to stay small is a liar. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And if He has been nudging your heart, even in the smallest way, that's not a coincidence. That's an invitation. So, you don't have to have it all together. You just have to be willing. And willingness, that's a prayer that God always answers. So ladies, if you know of a woman who needs to hear this, please do share the link with her. Please do share the link with her so that she also gets to understand that all she needs to do is to avail herself to say yes and to leave everything else to God. Until I talk to you next time, continue to walk in your purpose.